Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. First, we have an amended agenda before us. We have the addition of 10B, City Attorney Cost Analysis. I also believe we have a closed session. Dean, would you read the citation for the closed session?
It's paragraphs 3 and 5 of subsection 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Next, please join us in a moment of silence, and Vice Mayor Mensing, can you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment? Okay. Seeing no one and hearing no one, we will move on. No recognitions, no presentations, no consent agenda. Moving on to unfinished business, we have budget work session and city attorney cost analysis.
Mayor, I think Keith wanted me to go first.
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine. That's whatever you two decide.
Okay, so the handout is just for a little bit later. I just wanted to have it up there. The main discussion was tonight. I believe the mayor, either the last meeting or the meeting before, asked for a discussion about a deputy city attorney position and what it would cost and what my recommendations are.
Can you move the mic closer to your mouth?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
I
you.
didn't know if it was echoing or not. It sounds real loud over here. Okay, so we have a slide, and basically the position of associate or assistant city attorney, which we had in the budget, was at a salary of $130,000. Taxes and benefits associated with that are about $40,000. So the total cost for that position is $170,000. There's a couple of options that we can do. If we take that money from this budget, roll it over into the next 2 fiscal years, so basically half of that, $85,000 per year, and apply it to that $170,000, that gives us roughly $250,000 and change for each of the next 2 years. Subject to whatever the cost of living allowance would be. So that was kind of the number that I was using. That's more than enough to get a deputy. Now, the concern I have with getting a deputy right now is that I have about 1.5 lawyers worth of work to do. So I'm afraid that after about 6 months, the deputy might get bored because there might not be enough work. I don't think there's 2 people worth of work. There's one associate, like a new attorney, because that would be about half of a seasoned lawyer. But the deputy would have to be a seasoned lawyer, and I'm afraid that that person might get a little bit bored. So what I'm recommending instead is take that money and put it in a line item as additional legal services, get a law firm that does local government work and have them kind of on retainer to do any kind of overflow work. So when I get really, really busy with these contracts, maybe throw some contracts over to them. There is no way we're going to spend $250,000 on that every year, I guarantee you. So that frees up some money. My recommendation would be to put that money into a line item for potential litigation. We don't get sued very often. We haven't for the time I've been an attorney, but if it ever did come up, you'd run through money rather quickly. Okay, so it's something to think about. It's not a big concern right now, but because of that, and one of the things that Mr. Carrera mentioned in one of the emails, he asked me if there's money that would be available for the budget, and the answer is yes. So I'm thinking that if we just take the $170 a year and don't even worry about this year, just roll this year's back in, or put it as a line item for potential litigation. But if we're just taking the $170 that is rolling over from one year to the next, take $75,000, which I think was the number someone asked me about, that $75,000 would leave $95,000 plus whatever the COLA is. I think that's sufficient for the additional legal work we might need. I don't think we're going to even use that much, but that would be, in my mind, that would be a great idea because, and the reason I gave you guys this handout here is I'm very concerned about the point where I'm retired because I need to have a succession plan, and there aren't a lot of lawyers that do what local government attorneys do, where we do everything. A lot of the younger attorneys are specializing. So a lot of the big offices like Fairfax, Prince William, Alexandria, Arlington, where we used to, be able to go there and pick a young attorney, had a broad breadth of experience. That's not the case anymore. They're specializing. So I'm very concerned about being able to get someone who's going to have the broad experience in the various aspects of the law. You might get lucky, but I'm thinking if you look at the costs here, you're going to be paying a lot of money for that person. Some of the ones that are a little bit less, like the two that are most recent are Falls Church. She was hired last year. That's a pretty significant bump up from the average. So the Manassas city attorney's been there for a while, so his is probably just a step up, just like COLA, like mine. The Falls Church is the most recent one in the inner suburbs, or what I consider our competitors. You have Dumfries at $180,000, but that position not too long ago was kind of a part-time position. The attorneys there generally represented Quantico, Dumfries, and other smaller jurisdictions, Haymarket. There was one firm doing all that. So it's just recent that they've gotten a full-time city or town attorney down there. So I'm not really sure that we can take that number as something that we could expect. And they also are a town, so they don't have quite the same legal requirements as a city. So I'm thinking you're going to probably be looking more like around the 230-ish range. So what I suggest instead is if you allow me to go out and get a firm to pick up the slack, that firm will get to know what we do here in Manassas Park and would be able to, in my mind, take over at least at an interim status. So when I leave, they could pick up and there shouldn't be any problems with continuity. And then maybe you decide you want to hire that firm as the city attorney, which some towns and cities do. So that's why you have this in front of you, is just so you understand what the environment is. I was down in Richmond last week at a continuing legal education. I was, asking around. Most of the attorneys that do what I do, all are pretty happy where they are. They're all my age or maybe a little bit younger, probably getting ready to retire, and they're happy. They're in their cities that they're in. Like I've been here, 20 plus, or was it 23 years now? A lot of them are like that, so they're not really looking to leave. So that's my suggestion, is to try to find a firm. A couple of the firms that I would hoped would be an option, it seems like the people who are the face of the firm, the city attorney, the person that would show up at the meetings, are getting ready to retire themselves. The one firm that looks good is a firm we already have contracts with. They did the work for the condemnation for this building. We have them on retainer for litigation work. They represent Vienna and Fairfax, so they represent a couple of local jurisdictions. I'd like to talk to them about what they could offer us, if they could offer us a discount, and if so, maybe we could have someone come out here and give you a presentation. So anyway, that's my spiel. We do have money in the budget to do this. If you just roll over that line item, and then that frees up the 170 that you spent, or that you saved this year by not having an assistant city attorney. So you can just roll that right back into the general fund.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean. That's very interesting. Comments or questions?
What?
I just have,
Yes.
no, go ahead. Good question, Rich. So for our discussion, so 100K of that 170 would be moved over to legal services, and then 75 would be returned to general fund. Is that correct? Or is it?
Yeah, it's whatever the final, I don't know what the final number, let's see, what do we have? 173,117 is what is budgeted in 2025. So if you took the 73,117, to put that into or you could even take 75,317 and leave 95 in the line item. It would be added to the line item that I have right now for additional work. So I don't think we need a new line item necessarily. It would just be for additional legal services.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up?
I just have one other question, sorry.
Yeah.
to Chairman.
Yeah.
When is the last time your position as a legal services, as a class, as legal has been studied in the city, do you know?
I'm sorry,
When
I
has your
don't understand the
position
question.
been, last time it's been reviewed for compensation, separate from the COLA, has the legal department been reviewed here in the city?
I don't.
To
I don't
compare
think
to
it
other
has.
jurisdictions?
Well,
So-
when I was hired, when I was brought in-house, we looked at the other jurisdictions to find out what the salary should be.
Okay.
So that was 2017.
So a reclass or a general comparison has never been brought up?
No.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
I haven't been involved in one.
What year was that, Dean?
2017 is when I
2017?
came in-house.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay,
thanks.
Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I just want to understand your recommendation, Dean, and I think it's a good one. The hiring a law firm to do work that you aren't able to get to. But the money that we're going to move, the 70,000, is it 70 or the 100,000 that we'd be moving forward?
Well, so it'd be 95. You'd take 95 of that 170 and move it into a line item for additional legal services.
Yes, legal services.
75,000 would go towards lowering the tax rate.
So you are suggesting taking 75,000 and moving it into our general fund?
Right.
Never to be moved back to the...
Well, I had this conversation with Keith, because the only concern I
that's a-
have is
yeah.
that what happens if you guys decide you want a city attorney
Right.
and a deputy?
Absolutely.
You need the money. So he told me that it's just a one-year shift, and the next year, the next fiscal year, they're not taking that money.
Yeah.
So I'll let him explain.
I can comment on that. So
Yeah.
there is a line for legal services, that's about 70,000 right now. We're gonna add the 90 in saving from the deputy that we don't use, so that's about 160. The remaining 75, originally, we were gonna use some of that to kind of offset some of the costs that we're incurring, but after rethinking through some of the models, we are not going to need to use it. So we are not going to need to use that 75. So it can stay in Dean's salary, just in case we need to use it for a deputy city attorney in the future. If we don't use it, we'll roll it over to 26.
Okay,
So we don't need it in 25?
Not with the models that's currently proposed.
Okay.
okay.
So I
And-
keep
and it'll
the,
roll over then into FY '26?
Correct.
back into-
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of that.
Keith, did you say you do or do not need the
I-
75 this year?
The models that I'm showing tonight, we will not need to use it.
Well,
Okay, well, I'm
Take
I'm
your money,
glad
Dean,
it
take your
stays.
money.
yeah, put it all in there for contingency purposes.
Yeah, okay. Because if it went into the general fund this year but not next year, then that's not a recurring benefit.
Right.
Right.
I mean, generally, we like to leave salary lines alone
Yeah,
and just kind of carry over year over
Okay.
year. So
okay.
we try not to touch it.
Do you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay.
Excellent follow-up.
Councilman Hampton?
So I don't know much how law firms work. I just know how contracting firms work, where you have a more senior person, and then you have junior people that do the work, some of the work with the more senior people overseeing them. Is that the same situation with a law firm?
Yeah, so what would happen is that, let's say that the law, you guys decided to keep the law firm after I decided to retire, okay? Now you have a person. That person would be, a partner, okay? Someone who can think on his or her feet in a meeting like this and could represent the city as the city attorney. A lot of the basic work will be done by associates overseen by partners. The rates are less for the associates, as you indicated.
Right.
So the overall cost, and obviously I would oversee this, so they wouldn't get any work unless I felt it was necessary. It's much like we do for, like right now, I do all the personnel matters, any kind of employment related issues. If that was to ever get so complex that I didn't feel like I could properly represent the city, we'd have to go outside counsel. And it would have to be a decision I would have to make based upon my ethical obligations to properly represent the city. We don't do that because most of the stuff I can handle, but it would be the same kind of thing there, whereas if I felt that I was getting to the point where the backlog was causing a big problem for the city, which sometimes it does, I would have to punt some of that over, and I would expect them to give it to an attorney that was less than the partner level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow-up?
No.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Javed, have you had time to look it over?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. You- Be
can
sure
I-
to put your microphone down. Okay.
No question.
Okay, when do you need a decision, or do you want?
Well,
consent?
I'd like to know if this is a good plan that I can move forward with, if you want to
Yeah.
digest it a little bit
Yeah.
and tell me later. that's fine, but I'd like to get this in place coming up soon.
Okay.
Ideally, I can get them before the fiscal year, because I got a lot of stuff that I'm backlogged on, and I feel a little
Yeah,
bit bad
well,
about it.
let's take the pulse of the governing body. How do you feel about this?
I think it's a good idea.
I'm supportive.
Okay,
Support it.
I support it.
Support.
Support.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Well, I'll
Okay.
go and I'll ask them, maybe we can get the rate reduced from what they currently charge us, because we'll have some bulk rate going there. And then I'll plan on having that person come and brief
Good.
you.
Excellent. Go forth and negotiate.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the budget work session.
Yes, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So this is work session number 4, and the way I'll kind of do this is I'll kind of refresh your memory on the models that Mr. Palco briefed up to this point. I received 3 more models that we did analysis on. I'll kind of show what they are, how we're going to fund them, and then my recommendation at the end. So that's kind of how this is going to flow.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, that was, okay. So let me go all the way down here. So these are the original 9 that Mr. Palco presented to you all. So just kind of refresh your memory. This is the status quo. This is the Excel sheet that we received questions from you all and we answered today. It's 1.43 real estate, $3 personal property, and 2% COLA. And then, as you can see, we're unfreezing the zoning, but freezing a couple of position. There are some CIP projects that we also pushed back a couple of years. There are some CIP projects that we are doing that are a little more critical, but we did push back some CIP projects. Additionally, for this one, there is no contribution to the reserve in fiscal year 25 and 26. They're kind of the lean years. And then we pick up from 27 to 34. So that's the status quo. And then based off of that, based on your guidance, Mr. Palco presented 9 models, and then he recommended these 3. And as you can see, they're varying real estate, personal property, really sort of trade-off. And I think the key takeaway here is if you look at the real estate and personal property, it's sort of a 25 cents for 1 cent trade-off. You can kind of look at the 2 categories for each of those options. And this is important because I think it's going to feed into the balanced approach that I'm going to recommend at the end. So as for example, 139, that's a 4 cents reduction in real estate, and that's $1 personal property. So you're kind of trading up 25 cents for 1 cent. Okay.
Keith, really quick, 25 cents on the real estate for $1 on the tax rate? Or did I have
The
it
other way,
around?
25 cent personal property for $1 reduction in real estate.
Okay, thank you.
Or, I'm sorry, for 1 cent reduction in real estate.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hampton, could you put your microphone down?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So between the last work session to this one, we received 3 additional model requested for analysis. One was very similar to the strategic plan in terms of numbers, but it's got a plus 240. And then the other one is very similar to the status quo, except it's a slightly higher COLA. And so I just kind of renamed those, and I'll show you how. And then the 3rd model was requested, but it was the same as the pre-COVID personal property model. So what's the analysis on the first 2, the status quo balance? So as you can see, if we want to do a 1.42 real estate, which is a 1 cent reduction, and a $3 personal property tax, which is no change, and unfreezing the zoning position and 2% COLA, we're going to have a deficit all 10 years. Now, like I mentioned earlier, because there's no contribution to the reserves in fiscal year 25 and 26, we don't really have a way to balance it without using ARPA funding. Fortunately, we did find some excess ARPA funding, primarily the ARPA tenant improvement program. When we did the analysis for all of the space that are empty, and assuming that they're all filled and all of the tenant improvement programs are funded, we still have enough to cover 25 and 26. So that's the good news, and that's what the plan is, to cover that. For 26, for this model, unfortunately, once we exhausted that ARPA funding, we have to next look at CIP, and of the remaining CIP that's on the list, the least critical, in my opinion, is the green plan. And unfortunately, if we're going to go with this model, we're going to have to cut that in order to fund it. And then there's a small portion of the unspent amount set aside in 26 to purchase the community development building that we can tap in to fund 26. And then 27 in the out years, we propose to reduce the rainy day funds contributions in order to fund those deficits. Now, there's a difference between reducing the contribution versus touching reserves. If you look at the budget, there are 4 contributions to the reserves. There's a reserve line, and there's a rainy day fund lines. We're proposing to reduce the contribution to the rainy day funds.
Okay.
So it's not touching the reserves in any of these models. So.
Okay.
Moving on to the strategic plan model plus the 240. Again, same concept. The deficit is slightly lower because because you're not unfreezing the zoning position. So essentially, the cost is less, the deficit is less, so we have to use less funding to balance it out. But the same concept apply in fiscal year 24 when you use that excess ARPA funding. 26, unfortunately, the Green Plan CIP will have to go. And then the 27 to the out years, same concept. So based on essentially all of the combinations of real estate, personal property, COLA, my recommendation, which is a balanced approach with all aspects. Remember, I mentioned 1 cent real estate is equate to about 25 cent personal property, and that's kind of what you see here. We're kind of offsetting that by proposing this model. You still get the 1 cent reduction in real estate. I know we have the highest real estate rates in the region. We don't have the tax base, unfortunately, but we're one of only 3 jurisdictions that's going to reduce the real estate. So I think that's a little bit of good news there. Personal property, even though we're proposing to increase by 25 cents, the next highest is 360, and that's in Manassas, so we're still 35 cents below them.
Okay.
And they have a much stronger tax base than we do. And that will allow us to use 3% COLA to staff. Just a point on COLA, that's a comparative COLA rate. Unfortunately, we can't compete with the other jurisdiction. Most of them have 2 programs. They have STEP program and then COLA. So effectively, their rates are a little higher. But I think 3% is comparative to keep our staff. It's a little bit under inflation still, but I think it's comparative, and we should be able to retain a lot of staff that way.
Okay. Okay.
And then we get to unfreeze the zoning position. Now, initially, I did think that, if we hired the zoning inspector, he or she's gonna be busy for about 6 months with the short-term rental, and then it's gonna dwindle up. But after looking at it and after consulting with Calvin, because the city's main efforts is economic development going forward, I think that the work is gonna pick up on that end in terms of zoning. And so let's say he or she does short-term rental. If that program kind of winds down, there'll be plenty of work at that point from a zoning perspective.
Okay. Okay. Well, Keith, thank you so much for all the work that you did, and Tony, thank you. We know you really burned the midnight hour working on all the questions and all the permutations of this, and we appreciate that. Thank you. I like the recommended, the one in green. I support the 3.25 personal property tax because it's halfway between what it is and what it used to be, and like you said, we're still lower than Manassas. Is there any way through adjusting again the rainy day fund contributions going forward? Is there any way we can make the COLA 4%?
There is mathematically, I hate to say no, but I think from a balance perspective, it's going to be, we're going to have to eventually wipe out the rainy day contributions to do that. Right now, I think we're at $250K remaining for each of the out years.
Okay.
If we were to increase it to 4%, we would no longer have any rainy day contribution for the next 10 years.
Understood, understood. I'd sort of like to explain and give a little bit more detail to everyone my reasoning about why I recommended the zoning enforcement hire. External events at the national level can have a real impact on localities. And in that regard, there's an elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood, so I would first say that I strongly support immigration. Immigration is a positive benefit to the country. But what we have right now is not immigration. It is a wide open border. This is unprecedented, it's out of control, and it's not sustainable. Between 6 and 10 million migrants have just simply walked across the border, and we have to add in 100,000 getaways. That's a significant number of individuals. the migrants will eventually move outwards from the large cities, and that could affect us here in Manassas Park. We could see illegal renting at a much greater level than we do right now. So unless the border problem gets fixed, every state now or could soon become a border state. And that's why I recommended more zoning enforcement, just trying to be proactive, so.
If I could make my apologies, a comment on the COLA. I appreciate the suggestion, but from a management perspective, I would prefer if we find surpluses at the end of the fiscal year to translate some of those to bonuses.
Bonuses, okay.
I think that's a
Okay.
much more palatable way
Yeah.
than increasing something that's permanent.
Yeah. No, I understand, thank you. Okay, comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
And then by finding money at the end of the year and giving people bonuses, they actually get more of the money than spreading it out. I forget how many was, like, every other week.
26 pay period.
Yeah. I mean, I know personally, over the years, I always like getting bonuses versus getting, I don't know, like a 1% increase in my salary.
Yeah,
think-
bonuses are a happy little event.
Yes, they are. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably, based on the different questions we've had, we found some,
Yeah,
we can find
Yeah.
something somewhere.
okay. Do you, Councilmember Corral?
Yeah, thank you, City Manager, for that presentation. I'm willing to compromise here. The only thing I would add is, I would like the True 40 in your model, which doesn't cost anything, so.
We can do that, subject to the rest of the GB.
Because that would end up giving a little bit over
Could you
3.
repeat that
So,
again?
so giving the True 40, so the employees would not work 8.5, they would work 8 hours with a 1-hour lunch in it, and that would boost morale, and I think that would give an average about 3, probably 3.25.
Okay. Okay. Comments on that? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Keith, for your recommendation. I think it narrows everything down and is appreciated. I like the 3% COLA. I wouldn't want to go less than that. I would like to just put out there that real estate assessments have gone up 40% this past year. In contrast, car values have gone up 9.8%. So I would encourage us to consider going back to the 3.5 personal property to reduce the real estate 1 more cent, because we have been hearing it from our residents, they cannot afford to live here anymore, and we've been promising them that we would do what we can, and I think that is a compromise, considering the percentages that they've been increasing. And then I guess my question is about Mr. Carrera's True 40. Are there any downsides that we're not seeing that you could think of?
I think the only downside from my vantage point is I have to make it clear to staff that anything beyond 40 is not overtime. Because
Okay.
we do have a lot of staff that unfortunately works above the 40 hours. So I
Gotcha.
make that, I just want to manage expectations if we do implement that.
Okay, but you don't foresee any reductions in hours of City Hall or anything? Okay, great,
Okay,
thanks.
okay.
Excellent, Keith. I really appreciate the green box that we have before us to choose from, the city manager's recommendation. I agree with the vice mayor. I would like to see what she has suggested happen. I think her analysis is correct when you look at the assessments and what's happened. I've already seen several emails on Facebook about, wow, I've got my assessments and they're huge. So if we can reduce it down more to the 1.39 and raise the property, personal property to 3.5, that to me makes a greater sense. But if that's not a compromise on this dais that's going to be achieved, I'd much rather adopt the green box and appreciate Tony, our budget manager, and all the staff that went into pulling this together and working with us and their patience. Side notes, on the assessor issue, we talked about this before. We have to do a workshop on assessor and their values and how they evaluate our properties. We need to bring them in here, have them talk to us, because we're gonna get questions. They're gonna say, my property is not worth 40% higher than what it was yesterday or last year. So we can educate, if the governing body could be educated on how the assessor process works, then I think we can illuminate and educate the community as well. The other part, the True 40, to me, it's not really a budget issue, as it's been pointed out several times, and I appreciate Councilmember Michael for bringing that forward, but we need to uncouple it. We need to study it. We need to ask our staff if this is something they want. I have no problem with it. I have no problem with it. But I still want to hear from our staff before we couple it to our budget and say, this is what we're going to do, a true 40. I want to hear if Councilman Carrera is correct, and just to see, and we can uncouple it because it has no budgetary ramifications tonight. So again, I'm going to vote for the green box,
Yeah.
but would much rather see the lower property tax by 1.39 and the 3.5 personal property tax, given the analysis that our vice mayor has done. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the vice mayor. I could be very happy with 141, did you say?
1.3.
And 3.5.
Well, yeah, 3.5, and then I'd like to see what that would bring the real estate down.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we actually look at that model as well, and I think that's doable. I don't know about 139. I think we can look at 141 and 3.5.
Okay.
And I can bring that back.
Yeah, and I agree with Councilmember Moore. It would be nice to see an impact of what Councilmember Carrera is suggesting.
We can do a staff survey, and then going back to the assessor, would you like that to be immediately, or, okay?
Only because the assessors went, the bills went out last week,
Yeah.
giving us our assessed values,
Yeah.
and the questions are popping up on Facebook and on
Yeah.
our emails.
Yeah,
And if they could do it in plain English, that
Yes.
would be,
yeah. We had a briefing from them, but it must have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when before we brought the assessor in-house.
I mean, honestly, I can use a refresher myself, so we'll
Yeah.
have something.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
So it sounds like for next work session, I'll bring two options back, this one and just a flip.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other, yes,
just
ma'am?
really one thing for the true 40. If we could also find that if there's going to be any impact upon the residents, because I know
Yeah.
years ago, when we were in the old building, you had the general registrar here, and then down the hall, I think that was Commissioner Revenue. They would shut down every day for so many hours, and I remember that there was many residents that were unhappy about that. So I just want to make sure whatever we do, that it's not that detrimental to the residents.
That makes sense. We'll include that as part of our analysis. On that note, so at some point, when we go live with the first module of the ERP, those staff are gonna have to take a couple of days off to train on the new system. So we'll make sure the word gets out and public, the public's aware, but just wanna plug in since you mentioned that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Follow up? No? Do you have any questions, Councilmember Amaya? Okay. Yes, go ahead.
The personal property tax was at 350 how long ago?
Like 2 years ago, I think? 23, yeah.
523. And what was before that? So it's 350 before reduced. So everything we strive for the last 2 years, reducing that tax, I just feel like now we're going back to square one by increasing it back to the same level that it was 2 years ago.
Can you speak directly?
So I'm just saying that 350 2-3 years ago was a personal property tax, and we reduced it. We worked that hard to reduce that tax for our residents, and now we're going to undo all that to bring it back to where it was 2-3 years ago.
Well, we reduced it because of COVID. We reduced it to give them a temporary break because of COVID.
Right, which is fine too, but
Yeah.
we should continue to give the break to our residents. Doesn't make sense to increase the tax back to whatever levels it was. My I guess, opinion is that, or budget is, like I said, I don't want to see any increase in any type of tax, personal property tax. So, and the follow-up question would be, with these positions, the zoning position, like you said, I mean, it's going to tackle the short-term rental. Is there nobody in the staff that currently can do that right now?
I'll let Calvin answer that, but Mickey and Denora and Diane are both maxed out. Mickey, obviously, with some of the development projects that's going on, and then Diane and Denora, as you all know, are very busy with code enforcement just year-round. Our cases have gone up, I think, like 150%. So they're pretty maxed out,
Yeah.
Which cases?
like code enforcement cases.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine. The only question is that the short-term rental is not the only issue in our city when it comes to rentals, is long-term rentals too, right? I mean, if you're seeing the same car parked in the driveway, I'm assuming that's a long-term rental issue, not a short-term rental issue. So this whole thing tackling the short-term rental, I don't have any reason for that, but the zone, if we hire the zoning person, you're still gonna have the issue for the rentals, because the issue is with the long-term rentals. You can attack the Airbnbs, the Verbos, and whatever the other, Craigslist, but at the end of the day, residents still gonna complain about excessive parking, excessive cars, overcrowding in the houses because of the long-term rentals. So spending money on a zoning enforcer that doesn't tackle the actual issue and then increasing the taxes doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think that the point was, it was all illegal renting, right? Whether it's short-term or long-term, because the more people you put in a house, you're gonna have more cars, you're gonna have more garbage, you're gonna have more impact on infrastructure. I mean, it just stands to reason.
Right, well, I mean, it's not illegal to have a long-term rental. So at that point, you would need-
must register with the city. Calvin, can you explain the process?
So when we first began the discussion of additional enforcement personnel for rental inspections in general, rental program in general, it was short-term and long-term. There was discussion of expanding the rental inspection district to include the houses, the original houses in Bloom's Crossing, because they were now beyond a certain threshold of age, developed under an older code model and code year. So it made sense to expand the rental inspection district that currently only applies essentially to the townhouses in the center of town and the single-family homes in the west end of town. In that, there was a recommendation not just to hire a zoning personnel, but also a building inspector, because the major portion of rental inspections on long-term rentals is enforcement of the property maintenance code.
Right, so if you can pause right there. Now, the building inspector will be more beneficial for enforcing these rentals than a zoning enforcer. True or false?
So, well, we're the only jurisdiction I know of that puts this many hats on different people. I'm sure we have people, I'm sure there are jurisdictions similar to us in Southwest Virginia. But as far as north of Richmond and north, even out towards Hampton and Virginia Beach, you're not going to find jurisdictions where people wear this many hats. To have sort of that blended specialty so you are talking about a zoning violation. A violation of the rental inspection program is a zoning violation. Even if you have a building mind with a property maintenance certification to go out there and inspect them for property maintenance code, the violation needs to initiate with a zoning enforcement person. Then that building-minded person with the property maintenance certification can go out and inspect for violations of the property maintenance code, assign an occupant load, and approve an outgoing certificate. But then again, the follow-up has to be done by administrative staff or zoning staff. Are you going to find someone that's both zoning and building? I doubt it. I mean, we can't even really find anybody that's building right now.
Right. So to be effective in enforcing the rentals, you would need both a zoning and a building.
For the long term, yes.
But yet, we're only unfreezing the zoning and freezing the building. So it's not going to be effective to do anything.
But you're still going to be able to enforce the zoning portion of it. You're not allowed to
Right, the zoning portion,
Yeah,
right.
you're not allowed to operate a rental without permission of the city. Now, how we handle the property maintenance portion, I certainly can't put that all on Rick. He's the only inspector and plan reviewer in the city. Again, we wear a lot of hats. You've got one individual conducting all of the inspections and performing all the plan review. I share commercial plan review load with him. But to try to put property maintenance load on him, that's not going to work out. He already assists Denora and Diane when they have property maintenance cases. He goes out with them. To throw a rental inspection program's not going to work. But from a zoning standpoint, at least you could enforce the cases. You could go out and do what we were talking about, which is actively finding the illegal rentals and addressing them. Will you be efficient in getting a property maintenance inspection on your long-term rentals and turning over certificates quickly? Probably not, no. I just have to say we're short-staffed. I mean,
Would they be turned over, but just not as quickly?
the goal would have to shift to me to getting other people certified in property maintenance.
Okay.
And the biggest concern I've always had with that is that when a guy like me who has tons of certifications and has a background in contracting goes to get a property maintenance certification, I know a lot about construction already. I've built houses, I've built garages, I've built decks. Rick has been looking at those things for 30-some years. You know, we already know the building code, so when we talk to people about corrections and we're looking at things and wondering if they're right or not, we don't spend a lot of time wondering. We know whether they're right or wrong, whether they're safety issues, or whether they're just simple, you know, the gutter's falling down here because you're missing one gutter nail. You know, I'll give you a couple weeks to put it back up because it's not going to cost you $20,000. When people don't know things about construction themselves and they start issuing property maintenance notices, you can run into some problems because they could be asking people to do $50,000 worth of work in a week. And that's not the kind of customer service we want to offer. We want to offer education first, educated enforcement requirements second. You know, but we don't want to be out there telling people to do unreasonable things in a quick and, you know, expensive manner.
Okay, thank you. Do you have follow-up?
Yeah, and how would I guess, the administration be actively, proactively looking for these illegal renters?
So that's, I mean, you know,
Like,
they have to
how would you determine if
advertise-
it's a zoning violation?
They have to advertise somewhere. I mean,
Oh, well,
you're not
yeah,
gonna
I
run a
mean,
business if you're not advertising somewhere. So that was the very first thought we had was
Yeah.
the initial primary duty of this no zoning enforcement person, if their job is to pick up and run with a rental inspection program, is going to be to scour the various advertising sources, look for homes in Manassas Park that are being advertised for rent, and start knocking on doors and sending letters and trying to get. At first, you're seeking voluntary compliance.
Yeah.
You know, you're not in compliance with our program. Will you let us in for an inspection? And then, you know, after that, you're going to have to wind up probably seeking evidence and going before the magistrate to say, we have reason to believe that this advertisement is for this house. They're not in compliance with our program. Can we get in?
Well, specifically, then the long-term rentals.
Same thing, they're not in compliance with our rental inspection program.
Yeah.
If they're advertising for a long-term rental, then we're gonna find their advertisement. We did this in 2006 and 2007, and it was actually at my recommendation. I remember a staff meeting amongst building, planning, zoning staff, and we had 8 staff members back then. And we had the bandwidth to do it, so we actually would go to the grocery stores and rip the little numbers and call the owners and say, yeah, this house is on Baker Street, I'm interested, can I come look at it? And they would meet us there, and we'd say, we're with the city, we're here to, you know, we're here to see if you're renting the house out or not. But that was what we did, 2006 and 2007, and then the recession came, and it kind of became a null issue. There were more foreclosure signs than rental advertisements, so.
I mean, to me, if you want to enforce the real estate or the rental, you will need both the zoning and building to be effective. And if only doing one this year does not make sense because it is going to fall through the cracks. So my question to the body is, can this wait until we have enough for the zoning and building to unfreeze both positions?
We don't know when that will be. And we're still going to have illegal renting. And like Calvin said, you know, the zoning portion of it will be enforced, whether it be short-term or long-term.
Yeah, but he can't determine if the house has a second kitchen or if they built like an apartment style on their garage. That won't be enforced until you have a building inspector.
Well, those have surfaced before.
Right.
I know folks have emailed us photographs of homes with 2 kitchens. and they followed up on it. So that part of it cannot be proactive. But the illegal renting, yes.
And I think the illegal renting was just given as an example. I personally would rather have half of the package than none. I know from residents before I was on council, now that I'm on council, I've had my ear bent a lot about that. I know from when my brother was a police officer talking about some of the things that he's come across, and he was here 25 years, so he saw things go from single-family homes to single-family home turning into apartments. So the long and the short of it, it's out there. Better to have something than nothing. And unfortunately, I think would my preference be to have all of it? Yeah. But looking at the models based on the email that I sent, you guys saw how I went through everything, just to figure out how we can do something. We're just not, unfortunately, the times aren't as good as they once were. They're not bad, but they're not as good. So something has to give. But not on the back of the residents, so.
Yeah, I will
Well, I mean,
say,
last meeting, I think our goal was to get the COLA to 2%, right? That's what everybody agreed on. So, I mean, the status quo balance does that, right? Keith?
The status quo has 2%, correct?
Right, so, 2%, no increase, and still have the 1% reduction. And still has your zoning in there as well. I think that's what we all agreed to do, is the 2% COLA.
I thought it was 2.5% minimum.
Yeah, 2.5.
It was 2.5.
Well, that's because we thought we couldn't do 3. I mean, there was a sense that we might not be able to do that.
Right. No, the plan I presented last time, I think it was a 1% COLA increase, but everybody shot that down and we suggested at least let's get to 2%.
Yeah, 1%, I mean, even 2%, we're going to lose people.
What's the price of, what's inflation now? 4%?
Like 3.7, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to lose people at 2%, which is why we had to really look hard and find that extra 1%, honestly. And going back to your point about COVID, to Vice Mayor mentioned this point, Tony reminded me, the reason we did that was during COVID, and that was due to supply chain issue that really affected used car prices, which disproportionately affect blue-collar workers, which our city has a lot of. So we dropped it significantly during that time to help those folks. I think it's an artificially low drop, so I think by increasing it, we're still the lowest of all. And then Tony did remind me that if we were to go up to 3.5, I think we may be able to do a reduction on real estate, and because of the assessment, I think it might be a net positive to the resident.
Good.
Okay.
I think that's what we need to work towards.
Yes,
I would agree.
agreed,
So,
yeah.
can you say that again?
Councilmember Amaya, did you have a question?
I did, but it was answered.
Okay.
Can you say that again?
If we were to go to 3.5, I think we could reduce the real estate even more, 1, possibly 2 cents, but I need to check the numbers.
And then if we went to 3.5, then on a 30K, and I'm not very good at doing math in my head at this level. If we increased it back to 3.5, the personal property tax on a $30,000 vehicle, would that be now at $150 a year?
Yes, that's rough median estimate, correct. Obviously, if your vehicle is more expensive than,
Right, you're gonna be paying more. Yeah, I don't know, I gotta think it over.
Yeah, I mean, we're still a blue-collar city. That has not changed. Right?
Well, even if we're not.
COVID or not, I mean, we're still a blue-collar city.
Right, and I think the last thing I read is that lower middle class now is like 6 figures, 110, 120, something like that.
Do you have a follow-up?
No,
Okay.
I just need to think things through.
Okay, do you have any questions? Councilmember Moore?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Javed?
No.
Yeah, okay.
okay, so next time I'll bring back this green box option along with 2 other negative or minus 1 more cent real estate and possibly -2, and we'll see what the options are.
Okay.
Just a question on the deficit part. So if we do your recommendation, the deficit for 10 years, you said you were not going to, you're going to shift the ARPA funding?
For 25, 26, correct, because in the
Yeah.
current base model, we just don't have the ability to contribute to the rainy day funds.
And you will still be deficit after shifting?
Oh, yeah, for all of these models you see here, every year has a deficit.
So why-
But we'll be
I
able to
thought that
balance
was,
it by
I thought We're
reducing-
not going to do a deficit recommendation.
No, by increasing the personal property by 25 cents, you
Oh.
might be able to offset that 1 cent additional reduction in real estate.
Hmm.
It's very close.
But we may not even have the 10-cent deficit, we have, or the 10-year deficit, because we have other residential coming in, that taxes
Right,
come
right.
up. So
Yeah, and-
it can vary.
Correct, yep. Yeah, and we're doing this, to your point, by buying time until additional revenue comes in. And I know that, typically we underestimate revenue as a, we use conservative estimate to be safe, so to your point, yes.
Thank you.
A quick question, more for my knowledge. What happens if we do continue to run a deficit for 10 years?
Well, we try to balance every year for 10 years, but next year it may change. I mean, this year it could change.
Right,
And
well,
we can-
yeah, because we don't know what's going to even happen come November at the federal level.
The good news is that our revenue, real estate, personal property, unless there's a major recession like 2008, you can kind of expect those revenue streams to be constant.
Okay.
So it's really on the spending side that we worry about.
And to some degree, we have no control of that, like the inflation and, okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, I guess, is the body going with the pre-COVID plan? Is that what you guys are doing?
Recommended.
He's going to bring back
The
models.
recommended plus the analysis of increasing personal property to 3.5.
So I'll bring another.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's a pre-COVID recommendation.
I think it's bringing back options to see.
You want the 350,
What was your comment?
I'm saying that's the pre-COVID recommendation, the 350 personal with the 140 tax.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was already recommended, but this one doesn't have a deficit.
No, that one does as well.
It does.
Yeah, I believe all of these does, correct.
The top three all have deficits.
Deficit that we're able to balance with other mechanism. So it's not like, once you adopt this, we're going to run a deficit. Yeah. But I'll also bring back to see if 1.40 is doable. So,
Okay, thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much, much appreciated, and that is very balanced. Okay, moving on, there is no new business. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment time?
Just really quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Saturday, we, in the rain, went out, as you all saw on Facebook, and did a cleanup starting at the Lower Kent Park and around, and we collected around 70 pounds of trash. You all saw the quite large bag of beer cans. Yeah, a lot of Modella. But I'd like to thank everybody that came out, and also we will have a stream cleanup on June 19th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. just over here at the VRE.
Yeah, could you say that again for the folks at home?
Yes. So Wednesday, June 19th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. over the VRE parking lot, we are going to do a cleanup at the Russian Branch. And that'll be the first one that we've done underneath Keep the Park Beautiful. So we welcome everybody to come out.
Okay, super. Did I see a hand down here?
I just could get
Yes.
the time, if
Yeah.
Councilmember Hamilton.
10 to
Repeat the time.
10 to 12.
Thank you. I got the date. 10 to 12.
Anybody else?
I think yes.
Yeah?
No.
Did you have something?
No, I think Keith has something.
Okay, okay. Moving on to city manager's report.
well, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt public comment. So standing next to me, as you know, is Sarah, and I just want to give her a second to kind of introduce herself to you all and the public. But I give credit to Mr. Palco for promoting her in-house, and she's been wonderful as chief of ops, and she's been absolutely crushing it as deputy. So I'm very happy she's with the team. And with that being said, I'll kind of give the floor to her.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the governing body. Thank you, Keith, for entrusting me and appointing me in this position. I'm very excited to take on this interim role. Under this interim role, I'll be in charge of finance, HR, general services, and IT, in addition to my previous stuff of community services, code enforcement, special events, and then just regular operations. So it's a lot to take on, but I'm up for the challenge, for sure. So that's really all I have on myself. I sent you my intro email, so you kind of know some of my background, but very excited to help take on this challenge.
Yeah, well, we welcome you.
Awesome. While I'm up here, Keith, did you want me to talk about the Signal Bay stuff? Sure. So most of you probably saw my email from earlier this afternoon about Signal Bay Waterpark. We had a white coat or plaster, we use the term interchangeably, job scheduled there as part of the CIP. That was approved back in January. They started the work in April, which is what we asked them to do, because that way the pool would be perfect once we would open in May. That was the plan. However, things did not go as planned. They got in there to start doing the work, and they found a bunch of hollow points, which is basically the white coat that we got put on in 2015. I started to delaminate from the concrete behind it. A lot of that is pretty typical of the age of that infrastructure. It's bad concrete that's back there, and the white coat's not adhering the way it should. So in order to rectify that issue, they need to pull off all the delaminated white coat and put a fresh bond coat and fresh white coat on top. They initially came with a $250,000 kind of price, and we shook our heads and said, that ain't happening. They're now came back with $115,000. We're trying to get them under $100,000. Just, for our budgeting reasons. We already have about $100,000 in leftover CIP money from some other projects that came in under budget, so it's not really going to have a budgetary impact. However, the chances of us opening on Memorial Day weekend are pretty slim. I think if we go with the contractor that we're already under contract with, for the white coat, I think he may, surprise us and get it done maybe even before middle of June. But I think if we went with a separate contractor to address the hollow and the delamination, it just, then that contractor that has to come back in and do the white coat is going to have no incentive to finish the job in a timely manner. We will have, somewhat disenfranchised him by saying, nope, we're not using you for this job. So that's why our recommendation is to go with the company that we already have. They are doing the work. And again, like I said, I'm hoping he'll be able to get it done sooner, but he's telling us, mid-June.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Just the hollow point, is that just like the concrete has been kind of pulled off? Or?
Yeah, you can hear it if you walk around and you knock on the white coat in the lazy river. It sounds different. Some of it has already started to crumble off. When they're going around and prepping the surface for the white coat, they have to chip around the blue tile that goes around. And as they were doing that, sections were falling off. Same with the blue water line tile. In a perfect world, the blue water line tile should last 10 years. Now we're at 9, so we're cutting it close. But he thinks that again is just due to the age of the concrete behind the white coat. Technology and products have changed some in the 9 years since we got the water line tile. So I'm hoping that this next round of water line tile will last longer, but we'll see.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Thank you for that. I read your email, and I appreciate all the work you've done, and I would prefer it be done correctly than have them say mid-June, even if it's later in June. The other question I just have is, I know you start hiring for planning for that. What happens to that staff, the temp staff that comes in? Do they just get delayed about a month?
Yeah, and most of them, we'll find work for them
Okay.
in the indoor pool. It's always a push at the start of the season to get enough people in and ready to work. And then it's usually, they want to work some in June, maybe a little in July, and then they
remember
don't
that.
necessarily
And
want
they
to
don't show
work come
up.
August. But, so this may entice them to work longer on the back end. But I don't, it allows us more time to train them, to be honest. So I don't think we're going to lose a great deal of staff. Plus, when we open on Memorial Day weekend, we're only open for weekends until Manassas Park Schools lets out. So they're really only missing out on maybe 6 days of work, which really, doesn't affect most of them.
Thank you.
Comments or questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
first, sir, thank you for your explanation. When do we anticipate that the job will be done and we'll be able to open?
The contractor that we have on right now is saying mid-June he'll be done. He thinks, he's also said that if we went with another contractor, it would be much longer than that, but I think some of that is him saying he's then not going to make it a priority to come back and finish the work. He's not giving us a concrete date at this point, but like I said, just said mid-June. So we're hoping around the 14th or 15th. Maybe we'll be lucky and it'll be before, I think school lets out on the 8th or something like that. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. I'd be thinking of Prince William County, but, you know, we'll get that information, you know, we'll track it and hopefully it'll be sooner, but it'll be hard to tell.
I think you may have answered my follow-up question, but it was more what Councilmember Carrera was saying. Is it possible then to extend some hours in the evenings or on Saturdays so that our residents will get more enjoyment since they're going to miss several weeks of pool enjoyment?
That's a great question. We actually did increase our hours there a few years ago to go until 8 o'clock on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that was a big hit.
Yeah.
We don't recommend going any time past 8 p.m. just because of the lighting situation there. But I'll have to talk to Grace and Jay. Obviously, they're the ones in charge of it. I just happen to know quite a bit about it. You know, there might be the opportunity to stay open some weekends longer in August, or weekdays longer in August. We do revert back to weekends only, I believe. I can't remember if that was the case for this year. The only issue with that is that August does offer its own staffing challenges with kids going back to college and, you know, various vacations and whatnot, and that's part of the other reason that we would revert back to just weekends only until Labor Day was the staffing challenges that we would have there.
Great. Since you're up there, I also want to just thank you and Jay and Tony. The stairs at Signal Hill Park are phenomenal. Phenomenal. They're beautiful. The landscaping that's next to it, just gorgeous. And, you know, I'm no longer getting splinters, or our kids are getting splinters. It's kudos to Jay, his team,
Yeah.
and to Sarah and our budget manager. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah, what do you need from us? Do you need a consensus as to which one to follow, or what?
Yeah, I think, first I wanted to make you aware that we would be opening late. If we can get the quote that the contractor has promised us for under 100,000, then we really don't need anything from you.
Okay.
Right now, we have a quote for 115. Keith doesn't have signature authority on 115,000, so we will have to come to you for that if it's 100,000 or above. So I think Maura just wanted it on your radar.
Okay.
And
Because I was going to say, option one would be my pick.
well, and if he does come back and say, I can only get it at 100,000 plus, we will want to turn around on that pretty quickly to get a signature. So if we want to, if that needs to go to vote tonight, then that would be preferred, just because we don't want to waste any additional time at this
Yeah,
point.
of course, of course. Any other follow-up questions?
Really quick. No, I'd just be happy to vote on that tonight so that she can get started.
Yeah.
Just really one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and this is kind of a spinoff of Councilmember Moore's. I know some of the private pools open past Labor Day because we still kind of warm. Is that an option as well? To his point, to give the residents, we do it like on the weekends, to give the residents extra time in the water?
I would have to see what Jay and Grace would think of that. I can tell you from my previous years running the water park that it was a challenge at times to even get kids to work the dog swim that we used to have over there, which was always the weekend after Labor Day. So, and September is the most challenging time staff-wise. So
Yeah, because everybody, I remember when we're going back years, when I worked at the pool, we had it outside, like beginning of August, mid-November, it was just us high school students and the teachers, because the college kids went back.
Yeah, it gets difficult. I'm sure it's something that they could explore, but I wouldn't encourage them to commit to it yet, just because you don't know what the staffing is like
I was just curious.
in August and September. I mean, you can hire 150 kids, and by the end of the summer, you still only have 25 that really can work for you.
Okay, I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
It's
you.
a great idea, though.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Mensing, did you intend to, was it a suggestion to vote on the 115 this evening?
Yeah, or whatever Dean thinks is appropriate so that they can move forward with opening the pool as soon as possible.
Okay. Dean,
What's the question, I'm sorry?
whatever you think is appropriate to do this evening, Vice Mayor Mensing suggested that we vote on the 115 so that if something should happen, they can just keep on moving forward.
Oh, yeah. So you could approve it up to 115 tonight, authorize the city
Okay.
manager to sign.
Can you create a motion for us?
So this would, the motion would be to authorize the city manager to approve and sign an agreement with,
High Sierra Pools,
for,
$115,000.
to,
Remove the delaminated white coat and install blue water line tile.
okay, as presented, subject to final city attorney review.
Okay.
Second.
Did we get a second?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Sarah. Okay. Dean, could you read us into closed session?
Yes. I recommend the governing body go into closed meeting for the following reasons: to discuss and consider the disposition of 2 city-owned parcels where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy of the city, and to discuss 2 separate prospective businesses where no previous announcement has been made of their interest in locating in the city, pursuant to paragraphs 3 and 5 respectively of subsection 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.